Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. The hall did not need to announce its importance. It imposed it. Every sound knew where it was allowed to exist. Every footstep seemed to apologize before touching the polished floor. Light filtered down from floating crystalline panels that adjusted themselves whenever someone important shifted posture, which happened often, because important people enjoyed reminding gravity who was in charge. The human man stood near a column that was definitely older than his species, recorded history, trying very hard to look like he belonged and failing in small, private ways, like blinking too slowly when the air shimmered, or smiling a fraction too late when an alien noble finished a sentence that clearly required admiration. Across the hall, the alien princess sat in stillness that had been practiced for centuries by others before her. She looked human at first glance, enough to make diplomats relax, and then her long ears curved gently back from her head, elegant and unmistakable, signaling lineage, continuity, and a frightening amount of inherited expectation. Her expression was calm, but calm was something she did, not something she felt. Tonight carried weight, and not the kind that could be adjusted by the hall's gravity regulators. The gathering was formal, ceremonial, and deeply allergic to surprises, which made it unfortunate that the ancient instrument chose this exact moment to wake up. No one touched it. It never liked being touched. The instrument rested on its own platform, hovering a polite distance above the floor, its surface etched with symbols that had stopped meaning anything literal thousands of years ago. When it began to sing, the sound did not so much travel as remember itself into the air. Conversations died mid-syllable. Translators hesitated, then went quiet out of professional embarrassment. Even the security drones dimmed their lights, as if they, too, knew better than to interrupt. The melody was slow, spiraling, layered with intervals that made the human man's teeth feel slightly out of phase. He swallowed and tried to focus on breathing like a normal mammal. Around him, alien nobles tilted their heads in practiced reverence, many of them pretending familiarity they did not possess. The song belonged to the royal bloodline. Everyone knew that. Knowing something, however, was not the same as understanding it, and understanding it was not required to look appropriately moved. The princess closed her eyes. That was when the human man realized, with the sinking clarity usually reserved for terrible decisions, that he knew this song. Not intellectually, not academically. His body recognized it before his brain had a chance to intervene. His foot shifted, his chest loosened, and before he could stop himself, before etiquette or survival instinct could tackle him to the ground, he sang along, quietly, barely more than breath, his voice slipping into the spaces between the notes as if they had been waiting for him. He made it through 3 measures before he understood what he was doing. The hall reacted the way ecosystems do when an invasive species suddenly announces itself. Several nobles stiffened. One ambassador inhaled so sharply his translator mistook it for a request and began explaining agricultural subsidies. A guard's hand twitched toward a weapon designed to subdue small moons. Somewhere near the ceiling, a sensor pinged, confused but polite. The princess's eyes opened. The song did not stop, but it faltered, like a story realizing it had been interrupted. She turned her head slowly, long ears angling forward, and for the first time that evening her composure cracked. Not dramatically, not publicly, just enough for disbelief to escape. Her gaze locked onto the human. He stopped singing immediately because self-preservation finally caught up. "I can explain," he said, which was objectively untrue. Silence spread, thick and awkward. The instrument hovered, uncertain, then gently wound the melody down, as if deciding it would rather not be involved in whatever this was becoming. The princess stood. That alone was enough to trigger 3 emergency protocols and 1 quiet prayer from the diplomatic corps. She descended the steps with measured grace, each movement controlled, ceremonial, and entirely undone by the way her eyes never left the human man. She stopped an arm's length from him. You knew the words, she said. I knew the tune, he corrected weakly. The words feel optional. This was not the correct answer. Judging by the way several alien faces shifted into expressions that translators labeled as polite horror, there were no correct answers left. No one else knows that song, the princess said. Her voice was steady, but something beneath it trembled like a star under observation. Not outside the royal line. He shrugged helplessly. My grandmother used to hum it while cooking. She was terrible at cooking, burned everything. The song helped or made it worse, hard to say. A pause. One noble snorted before remembering where they were and turning it into a cough. The princess studied him, really studied him now, as if scanning past flesh and bone for echoes. Her ears twitched, betraying thoughts she could not quite contain. You are human, she said. Last I checked, he replied. There was a questionnaire. That earned him a sound dangerously close to laughter from somewhere behind her. The tension loosened, just a fraction, enough for air to return to the room. You will walk with me, the princess said. It was not a request. As they moved through the hall, whispers bloomed like static. The human man leaned closer and muttered, For the record, I didn't plan this. I was aiming for invisible. History rarely cares about plans, she said. Then softer, almost to herself, only about repetitions. They passed beneath the floating lights, and for a moment the melody lingered between them. Not sung, not played, simply remembered. They did not walk far before the hall's dignity gave up trying to follow them. The air changed, becoming less ceremonial and more functional, the lights dimming into narrower bands that adjusted themselves for privacy rather than spectacle. The human man noticed the shift and relaxed slightly, which immediately made him suspicious of his own judgment. This is usually where I'm escorted somewhere unpleasant, he said. A cell, an airlock, a very uncomfortable chair. If I intended to remove you from existence, the princess replied, it would not involve walking or warning. That's comforting in a very specific way. She glanced at him, her long ears tilting back, an involuntary motion that suggested amusement fighting protocol. They moved through corridors that curved in ways Euclidean geometry would have complained about, walls humming softly as data flowed beneath their surfaces. Drones drifted past, each one pausing just long enough to verify that the universe was still behaving. They stopped before a chamber that looked deceptively simple. The door opened itself without ceremony, recognizing her presence and, after a brief hesitation, allowing the human through as well. Inside, the room rearranged itself. The floor softened. The walls dimmed. A table unfolded from nothing, followed by two chairs that adjusted their height and shape with polite enthusiasm. The human watched his chair attempt to accommodate him and said, I feel judged. It is optimizing, she said. It knows too much. She sat, posture straight but no longer ceremonial, and gestured for him to do the same. As soon as he did, the room sealed itself with a sound like a held breath finally released. Silence followed, heavier than before. You should not know that melody, she said again, slower now as if repetition might reveal new answers. He rubbed the back of his neck. I've been told I shouldn't know a lot of things, tax law. Ballroom dancing, the location of my left sock, this feels bigger. It is. She folded her hands, fingers long and steady. The song predates our recorded history. It is encoded into our bloodlines, taught before language. It is said to preserve memory across generations. That's unsettling, he said. My family mostly preserved recipes and grudges. Her lips curved despite herself, and yet you sang. I didn't even realize I was doing it, he admitted. It felt like remembering how to breathe after holding it too long. That struck something. Her ears lifted slightly, then stilled. She tapped the table, and a field shimmered into existence above it, forming a lattice of stars, lines connecting systems in patterns that felt more musical than navigational. Our historians insist this is coincidence, she said. Our scientists disagree with our historians. They always do. There are gaps in our past, entire centuries that refused to explain themselves. He leaned forward, squinting at the projection. "You're saying my grandmother might have been royalty?" "No," she said quickly, then paused. "Probably not." "Good," he said. "She would have hated the responsibility." She adjusted the projection, zooming in on a cluster of systems near the galactic fringe. "There are theories, lost colonies, shared migrations, deliberate erasure to prevent political instability. One popular hypothesis suggests that fragments of our culture were seeded elsewhere as a kind of insurance." "Like backing up a hard drive," he said. "Yes," she said, "except the hard drive is people." He whistled softly, no pressure. A chime sounded, and the door shimmered, admitting a tall alien with eyes like polished stone and an expression permanently set to disapproval. "Your Highness," the figure said, glancing at the human as if he were a particularly bold houseplant, "the Council is requesting clarification." She did not look away from the human. "They will survive without it. They are uncertain whether to be offended or impressed. Tell them to practice both." The alien hesitated, and the song. Her gaze flicked, just briefly, toward the projection. "Tell them the universe is wider than we thought." The door sealed again. The human exhaled. "You're going to get in trouble for this." "I am already in trouble," she said calmly. "You are simply an interesting variable." "People have said that before," he replied. "Usually right before something explodes." She studied him, really studied him, and this time there was no shock in her eyes, only curiosity, cautious and sharp. "Sing it again," she said. He blinked. "Now." "Yes." He hesitated, then cleared his throat. The melody came more easily this time, unfolding with a familiarity that made his chest ache. He sang softly, imperfectly, his human voice smoothing edges the instrument never could. The room listened. When he finished, she closed her eyes, long ears trembling. "You sing it differently," she said, "as if it remembers joy." He smiled, small and uncertain. "My grandmother always said songs are braver when they're shared." The princess opened her eyes. For the first time, she believed him. The council chamber was not designed for comfort, which the human man decided was a shame, because if anyone ever needed a comfortable place to panic quietly, it was definitely a council chamber. The room curved upward like the inside of a shell, layered with floating seats occupied by beings who had perfected the art of looking patient while judging everything. At the center stood the princess, calm again on the surface, her long ears held in careful neutrality, as if they were afraid to give away what she already knew. He stood beside her, hands folded behind his back because that felt diplomatic, even though no one had told him to do that. Somewhere deep inside, a very practical part of his brain was still asking why humming along to a song had escalated into a galaxy-scale inquiry. A projection hovered between them, no longer just stars and lines, but data, genetic markers, cultural echoes, harmonic structures translated into mathematics so dense it looked offended by its own existence. The instrument's melody threaded through it all, reduced and expanded at the same time, its pattern repeating where it should not have been able to. "This is unprecedented," one council member said, their voice layered with modulation. "The resonance matches royal encoding." "And human vocal variants," another added, "which is statistically irritating." The human cleared his throat. "I'm sorry." The princess's mouth twitched. She gestured subtly and the data shifted again, settling into something clearer. "The song was never meant to be exclusive," she said. "It was meant to survive." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Our ancestors believed memory could outlast technology if woven into something instinctive," she continued. "Music, rhythm, breath. They seeded fragments of themselves into distant populations during the collapse, not as rulers, as echoes." The human tilted his head. "So you're saying my grandma was an echo?" "Yes," the princess said, "a very stubborn one." That earned him a few surprised looks, and one council member made a sound suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. The tension shifted, not gone but lighter, as if the universe itself had decided this was less threatening than it had first appeared. The human did not steal the song, the princess said firmly. He carried it, unknowingly, as intended. Silence followed, long enough for policy to be rewritten internally. Finally, the eldest council member leaned forward. If this is true, they said, then the royal line is not singular. The princess inclined her head. It never was. The decision came not with ceremony but with exhaustion. Archives were opened. Restrictions eased. The song was released, not to be owned but to be taught, studied, shared. The instrument was moved from its platform and for the first time in recorded history, allowed to be played by hands that did not share royal blood. When it sang again, it sounded fuller. Later, much later, the human found himself standing on a balcony overlooking a city that pulsed with light and motion, alien and suddenly familiar. The princess stood beside him, her posture relaxed in a way he suspected she had only recently learned was allowed. "You changed a great many things today," she said. "I just sang badly in public," he replied. "It's kind of my brand." She looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled without restraint. "You reminded us that history is not a straight line. It loops." He leaned on the railing. "So what happens now?" She considered that. "Now we listen, we compare memories, we learn what was forgotten." "And me?" Her long ears angled toward him, soft, unguarded. "You go home, or you stay, or you travel between worlds humming songs that make diplomats nervous." He laughed, surprised by how easy it felt. "I think," he said slowly, "I'd like to learn the rest of the verses." She nodded. "I would like that too." The city sounds rose around them, layered and alive. Somewhere below, someone had begun humming